one end. Firstly, we're going to understand what are we for, what are we against, and what is our mechanism. And secondly, we're going to talk about two things. Firstly, about how we are minimizing volatility in the market, and secondly, how we are making the market more accessible to smaller investors. Let's understand what is our framing. Firstly, we're not against every algorithm. If we have a machine learning algorithm that suggests to us what are the good stocks to invest in, we think it's okay. We are fine with that. We are fine with using computer science for trading. But what we are against, things that are in very high frequencies, things that are happening very, very fast and benefiting from small things that literally only a machine can see in real time. We think this is what we are against, this high frequency trading, right? It's in the name. Okay, how will we actually do that? We think we don't have to set a mechanism, right? We can have a committee of economics. I'll give you some percentage in a second. But some like a committee of economics that know how much tax is needed to make the market more cooler, to have less of investments like that. And we think it can change over time. If we see that people are still investing, we can do it much higher. If we don't, much lower. We think it is probably going to be something like 25%. We're not sure. They will decide, but this will be about 25. Clarification, yes.
So this isn't like a principled position about what we should or should not pay taxes on. This is just purely, is this good for the market, yes or no? And
it can also be principled, but I maybe do something else. I will do something. Okay, let's go and understand why are we really against volatility in the market and why HFT makes it much larger. So firstly, how does it actually work? We think that those kinds of algorithms, they work really, really fast. They find some patterns in the market, some things like, for example, on Tuesday, Meta's stock is declining in its value. We think they can find it, but it may not have some rationale. It's okay. How do we think it actually works? They find little places where they can actually sell and like buy and sell the stock in order to gain more money. Here we think they are inherently worse than human. Why is this the case? Firstly, we think they find just things like just arbitrage. Arbitrages, I don't know how to say in English, right? Places where you have a negative cycle where if you sell something and buy it, it will give you more money. They enter into those circles. The circles, they benefit from it much more, and so they just can earn more money. But secondly, we think they don't stay for the long run, but exit once they have some problem. This is completely opposed to human. Why? Because in human we have general principle, for example, the market being something that grows and grows and having generally a growth in population, which means that human have more incentive overall to stay in the market for the long time. So we think those sorts of algorithms have no incentive to do that, and they do that very, very fast. What does it mean and how does it look in reality? It looks like they buy stocks of company, and then once there is the slightest friction in the company, some pattern that only the algorithms can see, maybe not connected at all to reality, they will sell the algorithm. And because we have so many HFT, and this is the problem, the critical mass of HFT, which is what we want to minimize, we are creating a chain reaction where the price of this company is getting lower and lower, meaning that it's not just you that is making it lower, that is selling the share, but also all the other HFTs that you have. And because of that, this is a chain reaction. More of those little algorithms are selling their stocks, and so we have a big fall in the price of stocks that is not based on something like performance of company and things like that, but because of the algorithm decided to do that. It also says that we are creating much more arbitrage, places where we are just benefiting off a loop in the market. We think it is very, very bad because it really creates much more like much more hot market, much more things, and so we think this is bad. What are the impacts of that? Firstly, we think we have short crises. Why is that the case? Because when a company is overall going down, people are much more likely to try and gain money for that. They have more shorts on this company, and so there is this negative feedback loop that even if the company is okay, it is still getting worse performance because of those of those HFTs. We think because of that, companies cannot continue, and they actually have like just much worse performance that can even lead to them collapsing. Secondly, we think that pension funds are really hurt by that, because we think that every actively investing is someone that expects growth for the long run. When the HFTs are not something that they do by themselves, because this is very high risk and they can't provide it to the investors, that was a very low risk investment, but for the long run, they cannot, they are just losing money because of the HFTs. Because of that, we think that pension funds of people are just declining the price, and we think this is just wrong. Why is this tax actually make things better? So firstly, simply more money to actually deal with those things, and this is part of the mechanism before. We can use this money to give bailouts to companies that got hurt, to give people more pension funds that are needed. Secondly, we think it makes less people doing it for the first place. As I told you before, the problem is not one HFT algorithm, it's many of them, and when this becomes profitable, at this point we think we are creating this chain reaction which is so negative. Before I continue, did you have a point?
Yes. If HFT is so bad, why are you just putting a tax on it and not banning it completely?
We think, firstly, we think that it's not bad by itself. The problem is the accumulation of it, right? We think that because it firstly creates a damage to people, we are rightfully taxing it. But secondly, the fact that you have so many leading to this chain reaction is the thing we're trying to stop. Because of that, we are taxing, meaning that we are minimizing the amount of it or not other things. Why does it also hurt accessibility? So, as the example of the pension funds, when I am a new investor, I cannot enter the market if we have all those HFTs that are running around and doing those things. Firstly, because the market is very, very fast, I don't know what to do. It is hard to access those algorithms because it requires much more computing power, much more complex algorithms that not everyone has, and I can't just go and invent them. And so we think little investors, people that really want to just have a pension fund or invest actively in stock, are the ones that are getting hurt the most because they are not benefiting from what the market has to give, from the growth in the market and from the active investment that they could have done, but rather they lose because they can't enter it, and because of that, the tax will allow them to enter more, since it's
Let's open with engagement to opening the position. First of all, on the market efficiency point, Yael already pointed out that we can do it use like lower frequency but still computer generated to still ensure that the market is balanced based on their own mechanism. Later, I will show why specifically these algorithms have more incentive to do that instead of fucking over investors. Note that. Second of all, on their mechanisms as to why these companies are already self-regulating. Note, you can't just throw mechanisms around, right? You have to show why they're specifically sufficient, especially when our mechanism is we're just going to do enough tax so it will be sufficient. Specifically, internet costs, relatively cheap nowadays. You just close to them, and generally speaking, you don't pay like per trade. You pay on the general board bet, and not that much generally. Fees are quite low. All of these stock markets, different stock markets, have an incentive to lower them as much as possible. There's a lot of traders today. Operating a stock market doesn't cost that much fees, and we don't think that this is necessarily by itself for these traders that rich, especially when they usually cut deals with the stock market because they're very rich, have very close connections to the stock market, and stuff like that. On regulators, usually pocket right, rotating door, and stuff like that. And lastly, the media doesn't understand finance that well, doesn't call them out that well, never explain why these mechanisms are sufficient. Lastly, on the populism point, look, I know that like in abroad we don't do this house wooden policy motions anymore, but this is one. We have a MEC works, independent economists. They don't have any ability to run populism. They don't have any ability to do any of that. Let's move on to the positions of stock market and why I really don't care about efficiency and market efficiency in this debate. Number one, note, day trading is a zero sum. As in, all of the mechanisms which cause the stock markets to raise up over time, that is to say the economy grows, more companies enter in, the government invests into the market, and this news comes into investors that invest in the stock market and make it go and stuff like that, happen on our side as well because the news still propagates, just slower, right? So over time it's like cancels out, because if you still, like the news is from a month ago, still over time the growth curves look the same, even if it's just the news by 1 month ago as it propagates through the market. So generally speaking, the growth in the market is the same. It's just that the trading is more efficient for these HFTs. So on the zero-sum competition, which is usually called day trading, where people are basically playing a roulette, they have an inherent advantage, which is the fact that they can do it faster as compared to the average person that they want to. Secondly, note, stock value isn't inherently connected to like the actual market value of the company. When you pay for a stock, you don't usually pay directly the company after like the initial IPO. You usually pay another investor, right? You pay another person with money. Why is this crucial? Because we often think that the opposite happens. i.e. the fact that people look at the stock and decide the real value of the company based around that. That is to say, people look at the stock value of the company and decide how much they want to invest their capital in. The other companies decide how much they want to do connection with the company and stuff like that. This means that we think that it oftentimes works the opposite, and generally speaking, I look for a slightly more efficient market because I'm not sure what market efficiency means, how to translate into real impact, and all of that. On the question of normal investors and what they do, very, very, very important. All of the mechanisms on why like HFTs have the interest to cooperate with one another, have to compete with one another, fall into one problem. Competing with HFTs is far harder than competing with the average Joe or the lower trader. Why is that true? Because against other HFTs, you're always competing in a race for who is the fastest, who has the best algorithm, all of that. So profit margins are relatively low. In competing against normal Joes and normal suckers and extracting values out of them, I've been seeing what normal investors are doing and working against the price in a zero-sum game called day trading. It's far easier because you have inherited values against them. You read the news quicker. You can trade far quicker. You have easier connection to the stock market and can far more quickly monitor it and trade. Why is this crucial? Because on our side, in comparative, it's far more better for you in the sense that you aren't under the selection of these mechanisms. You trade in the same volume, so it's already closed down. Other people have more of a chance to catch up on news. Other investor companies and stuff like that have more of an ability to do their own algorithms and compete against you, unlike specifically HFTs. This is crucial for the average Joe, the normal day trader. The person who has entered through Robinhood has been suckered in as per OO and is now getting intensively fucked over by HFTs. Second of all, it's about companies that can just do HFT. For example, pension funds. Most pension funds, I wish they invested just in S&P and all of that, and just market growth, but usually they don't. Usually they try to beat the market on their own terms, but they can't always do HFT because they want to show consistent profit values. They don't want to risk on specific trends within the market and stuff like that. So generally speaking, all of these companies are far more susceptible under the market to be suckered with. The reason why this is crucial, and this is important at that point, is the fact that I just don't care about how much money HFTs make directly. HFTs are rich people, usually private companies. The average Joe doesn't invest in them. They may be rich people who lose some more money. The average Joe needs more money. The average day trader who suckers it in feels it a lot more, generally speaking, or the average person who loses the pension funds or the pension fund is getting cut down, and now they need to live 20, 30 years, stuff like that. Last one, this point. Oh, but why do you tax people? Why do you not ban it altogether? Look, banning it altogether kind of requires a hard line, right? We don't know what the hard line between HFT and smaller day trading is, and also we kind of want to let the market to have some level of an ability to self-correct, as we think that HFT is usually bad, but if in a very specific case you need it or something, we don't want it. We just think that we ought to limit it to reduce the ability to sucker people through the tax, and which also enables the government to pay reparations to help people who are down under and stuff like that in order to not fuck them over. CEO, do you have any extension, please? Engagement.
Wait, so if these fees are of no consequence to large-scale traders who are rich and don't care about paying them, then yes, markets would raise them because it doesn't reduce their investment, and there is already a very significant barrier to HFTs that we would like to lower.
I have no clue. First of all, I have no clue what this POI is, in the sense that already puts you a mechanism. Like, you can have higher taxes starting from a level of value. You can they can probably set it up in such a way that it does tax in stocks in the same way that high frequency trading every single time that you do it piles up, and probably in a way that has probably a value capital invested in the market, so that small traders don't have to pay this tax. Probably something that economists can do and ensure that works. Second of all, I think that HFTs have inherently high barriers simply due to the very simple fact that they cost a lot of money to maintain. Algorithms, computers, you always need to develop them, need to hire a lot of high-tech people who cost a lot of salary. Not sure how you magically reduce them on yourself. Okay, lastly, on volatility. Note here, the fact that you always want to target suckers means that it's inherently good for you to be volatile, as in to run up the market, let other people join in on the fun, and then cut out the last minute and short, because you can always act quicker than the average sucker. Same thing with shorting aggressively, and then letting other people enter and fucking them over. This is what, for example, happened with GameStop and other such companies, which allows you to immediately rise up and reduce prices. The reason why this is crucial is because oftentimes there is a Tinkerbell effect. As in, the fact that you raise up or lower the value of the stock considerably actually changes how people view the company, actually changes how much people invest in the company. And this means that, for example, if you run down a company relatively quickly or raise it up, you create bubbles, you create more people investing in actual ways that they want to do so economically, or making the company unable to respond. In our world, the Tinkerbell effect doesn't happen, and these companies have more time to respond to what is happening in the market, to actually make plans to save themselves from the reducing stock prices, to actually enable the fact that the stock prices are rising right now and not just going to be cut quickly. The fact that we give companies more response time actually allows them to act better, optimize the market better, receive always impact, and actually help the people on the ground prevent bubbles. Very happy to propose.
in this debate, we showed you and got almost no response, like correct response to what Omer gave to us, besides other analysis from Guy, that HFTs are generally good for the economy. They prevent the slippery slopes that OG are talking about. They create jobs, they pay taxes, and generally speaking, they don't create the volatility that OG is trying to depict, but maybe at best they create somewhat volatility that doesn't really affect the market, thus creating us benefit that we don't want to discourage, we don't want the money to go. In my speech I will give other benefits that they bring to there, I will answer them, and the last thing I will do, I will explain why it's the worst way possible to limit these kind of things, even if this is what side government wants, why doing it through the government, not through the stock exchange, is a bad thing, and why, generally speaking, even if they do bad shit, then we prefer this bad shit than the alternative, which is to limit it. Cool. So what let's deal with OG and what do they tell us? Because firstly, notice they didn't really analyze in a good way that HFTs cause damage. Because I know that you think that, but saying arbitrage 20 times in a speech is not analysis. Right? We don't think that arbitrage is something that exists to a large degree today, because also the stock exchanges and companies have algorithms themselves to prevent this kind of things from happening, so we don't think that it's such a large problem as they try to claim. Now the second thing that they are telling us is, look, but the humans act differently to algorithm, therefore we don't see this Tinkerbell effect and people are staying with stocks for a longer time and nobody is living at the same time. But notice that OG themselves stated several times that they don't ban algorithms at all, right? If all of the algorithms think at the same time of all of the other companies that we shouldn't invest in Facebook, then all of the people will sell at once Facebook. It doesn't matter that it's day trade versus not day trade, and because all of their biases exist to algorithms today, which is something that they don't have. Comparatively, notice that Or's analysis that got no answer from Guy about how these companies oftentimes act against as a force trying to block one another, and if the company is slightly undervalued because of a bad decision by one algorithm, then the other algorithm fixes it or at least tries to fix it in an optimal environment. This is something that prevents the slippery slope, right? This is something that if maybe too many algorithms did a bad call, these fast algorithms can fix it rather quickly, and this is something that only HFTs can do and not regular day trading. Now, they are telling to us, no, the money that they are taking is from the average Joe. It's not from like the other companies, because why would they fight the other companies? But notice that average Joes doing day trading to the same like speed that they are describing is not something very common, right? Most people don't invest. No, sorry, guys. Don't invest in the same speed. Most people don't are only doing like trades in larger times, and therefore, when the large money is the money that you fight off against other companies that do the same as you, then you try to fight against them and not try to make little bucks of small people. We think that generally speaking, companies hold much higher values of money, and therefore you can earn much more by fighting them. Now the second thing that I want to say about OG is that they don't think that the volatility they are describing is the volatility that they are trying to describe, right? They are saying to us, look, pension funds are going to get erased again, but them themselves told us that the slopes look basically the same, right? Over a long time, then it's only like minor, like day ups and downs that changes to the NFT. This is something that doesn't really affect pensions for a long time. So I don't think that they really analyze it. Comparatively, we've analyzed benefits of the HFT, both in terms that, A, they do pay taxes, both in fees, stock and change on every exchange, in the sense they are doing it very often, they pay a lot of it, and B, they pay for the real estate as close to the stock exchange as possible, because it's something super expensive. They pay internet fees, they have many employees that they pay mortgages and they bring them money to put on the table, right? Even they can't say, oh no, it's only rich people, because their money floats all over the economy. Even in the best case of government, that we bring a task that puts them away so much, then they will go to other places, right? They will go to stock exchanges that don't put this kind of limitation, like China, like other countries that are not the countries that we are describing currently. And then all of their monies and all of the employers and all of the taxes that they bring don't get to our citizens at all. And we think that it's a bad thing. We think that it's much larger impact than somewhat more volatility on the daylight trade when it doesn't really affect people that trade on a much larger scale of time. For closing.
If high-frequency trading is more efficient and comes with a 25% tax, the core question of the debate is whether HFT is still worth it. So how do you think those investors will trade tomorrow, and do you really think it's in China?
I think maybe some of them will move to other places. Yes, if you take the most place to earn more money, and they already have the algorithms, and they already have the people and the infrastructure to do so, yes, I think many of them will move to different countries. But even if they don't, and they will move to regular trading, I don't think that it's any damage. No? And as we said to you, and got no actual analysis from government to fight. Second thing I want to say is about like the weird stance from government. Because governments have to stand putting tax and not limiting this kind of thing completely. Guy tried to say us, no, but we don't know the exact line of limiting. I don't think that at any point like setting a slightly inaccurate line on what is HFT and what is not HFT has been analyzed in this debate as something that causes damage. I don't think that it causes damage, and if the damages they are describing, we should definitely ban it and not allow these actors to act in our economy. If it's too much tax, I don't think that it's considered as tax anymore. I think it's considered as ban. Just like putting 100, taking all of your money, it's not 100% tax, it's still cool. The last thing I want to talk to you is about alternatives. Because all explained to you that the country is not a good actor in the sense that it's political. Now they're saying, look, independent committee and things like that, but we don't think that the independent committee is a very good, very likely thing, right? Maybe it's independent for some time, but the people who appoint the people in it can change. We think that the stock exchange, for instance, who has experts, whose all goal in life is to make the stock exchanges go larger, these are people who can set the limits, and these are people with much better incentives, and if these high edge of these are bad as governments can, these are people that would do. We think that they are not as bad as they can, therefore the stock exchange doesn't put these limits, but if they were, we think that the experts would have done good things. We call you to folks. Thank you.
2, 1. Look, I haven't slept at all last night after our prep in America, and I've been smoking all day. This didn't hurt me too much in the previous rounds. Evidently, we're here. But it did make it a little hard to tackle this question. Luckily for me, OG did leave us something very big. Tax. When we tax something, we get a lot of money. We're going to explain why this is a lot of money, how we use this a lot of money. This will be a far more tangible impact on far more people who are far more vulnerable and therefore will easily win this debate. Before that, some framing and some engagement. OG gave us 2 cases. They talked to us about access and about volatility. Let's start with access. Most people who invest do it through investment arms such as pension funds, bank, or investment firms. Why are those arms unlikely to use HFT? I have no idea. People who choose to do day trading on their own as a hobby know that they are earning less than if they would just put their money in an index fund and choose to do that trade-off in order to fund their hobby of day trading. I'm unsure who the population is for whom it is accessible from OG. Let's talk then about their mechanism. Let me help OG because they set it at 25%, but in order to reach any of their impacts of minimizing HFT trading, they need to make it less profitable. Whatever delta between HFT and low frequency trading currently exists, that's the delta that they tax. If they tax it at 25%, that isn't nearly enough to change the incentives because it is still 75% of the delta in profitability is still the profit. They can't mean 25% of the entire value of the HFT because if that were the case, within 10 trades you would lose all your money, right? So they're necessarily talking about 25% of the delta. What does that mean? Okay. That you have to tax near 100% of the gap in order to access any of OG's impacts on decreasing volatility. Note, presuming you don't stand to this extent, my case still stands as it is scalar. Theirs is binary. As long as HFT remains the dominant strategy because it's the most profitable, it will remain the widespread strategy and we have their harms to volatility. Let's get into my framing on taxes. Look guys, we have enough. Wait, Kafas. We have enough. We have enough to feed everyone hungry, to shelter everyone homeless, to ensure every little kid gets good education, and to ensure we all have access to utilities and infrastructure. But most of our wealth, most of our social value is tied up by the rich in economic systems. Using countless loopholes, the rich ensure they never pay taxes and ensure that a majority of profit from growth falls back into their hands. Even though capital gains taxes are much lower than income taxes, the rich still find loopholes like HFT to ensure their money never gets taxed because it's never withdrawn from the market. We uniquely get a tax on this massive source of wealth. OO somehow claimed that we pay tax on every exchange. That's not true. If that were true, like that would be the motion. HFT trades would be impossible if that were the case. But note, capital gains tax have to be done only when you withdraw your money. If they're done on, say, daily shifts, then if they're done on independent trades, you're just unable to trade, which harms all of their other cases. But if they're done on daily changes, then that means that when your stocks drop, the government needs to pay you, which they don't do. So I don't think they just tax you whenever the value of your stock goes up. They tax you on capital gains when they take it out. Why are we talking then about a significant amount of funds? First, quantity. First, mechanism. OG actually meant to mechanize this as far higher than 25% in order to reach their cases. Secondly, quantity. We have many, many trades. We get to tax each one of them separately. Next, size. We have massive investments of hundreds of millions of dollars being moved around every day. Third, advantage. Everything OO analyzed about the efficiency of this system, that's the advantage that this has, which means that there's a significant use of this, and the use of it benefits a significant advantage of how much money it brings in. Finally, it's across all financial markets, stocks, bonds, currency exchanges, too, I think, any place where we can have HFT. So what can we do with this money? First, we can fund healthcare. This looks like beds, doctors, nurses, preventing their burnout, their exhaustion, their 70-hour work weeks. It looks like investing in medical research, getting new solutions to cancer, to Alzheimer's, to dementia, to obesity. It looks like funding schooling. We're talking about investing in gyms, about investing in extracurricular activities, in special ed classes, in access for disabilities, in smaller classes so that each student has more time with their teacher. It looks like university grants. We're funding infrastructure. This looks like buses, electricity, internet, mail. Now, if we somehow don't have need for all of this, if somehow all of our government's expenses are covered, even though, which is very unlikely in any country, we can still use this money. We can increase our foreign aid and save starving kids in Yemen or in Sudan. Using malaria nets, we can save babies from dying from horrible illnesses in a second. And we can also decrease the tax burden on the rest of our citizens, giving them access to more goods and services, an additional restaurant, a newer iPhone. Let's take a few
Look, Ayal, we can tax everything in the world to do all of the good things that we want. The thing is that we don't do special taxes only when it's
Unfortunately, Omer, you have to explain why your alternative is likely, while we are given fiat by the motion. Insofar as any of your alternatives are likely, we think we can use that fiat in order to add additional taxes on top of this mechanism, accessing all of our impacts to a greater extent. Why are we morally obligated to tax capital gains? We owe it to the disenfranchised to give them the help we can afford to give them. First, via utilitarianism. They are the most vulnerable members of society who don't have the capacity to protect themselves from a rainy day or cancer. They're also the most harmed by the lack of funds. But secondly, deontologically, the distinction between action and inaction become insignificant when we observe the morality of an action. Either way, we enable a harm which we uniquely can prevent. Ignoring a dying baby is killing a baby, and babies are dying. Opening opposition are killing babies. So far as we believe people are entitled to their rights to education, to health, to security, not using our value to give them that is a moral harm. I don't have time for my social contract reasoning, but I assure you, it is just as strong. For all of these reasons, go with closing
I'm going to explain really boring things about the economy that have lives, like over-investing in large companies, under-investing in small companies, how that leads to monopolization, lower innovation, and hurting productivity in general, leading to actually explaining why people end up dying, only with real analysis. Now, before that, I'm just going to do a couple of points of rebuttal. We hear from closing opposition, oh look, this is a great way to tax people. They don't show any uniqueness for why this is the way we should be taxing people, or even why that's the way to access this, and they also don't show why this isn't relevant to all institutions. Opening government have one thing I want to answer that isn't dealt with in my actual analysis. They tell us people can compete. Robin Hood traders, oh my god, they get rich. Unfortunately, that just isn't the case. Most of the time, these people are not close enough and do not have access to the information to be able to compete. More than that, weighing, they are almost nothing. Like, even if you say they are billions of dollars, the amount of money we're talking about are everyone's pensions, all the money that exists in the stock market, so that's everyone's savings. It is trillions, hundreds of trillions of dollars. It just doesn't matter. Great, my points. Why taxes are going to kill HFTs, then why HFTs are good. 1. Traders really don't like HFTs. Why? 1, they may replace traders very, very quickly. If what happens is HFTs are constantly doing all the day trades, that takes away a lot of what the traders actually do. 1, it literally takes away their actual job. But secondly, it also takes away the interesting bit. The bit that gets the blood racing. The bit that isn't just like sitting down and reading through thousands of pages of really, really boring numbers, trying to add together and figure out, okay, is this place where I should be making the next investment for my long-term investment or not? And that's the kind of thing they don't want to have to be doing. So HFTs are competing against what traders actually want. Secondly, it's unfamiliar, and so they're often suspicious of it and don't want to be using these tools. Thirdly, they don't understand them and they don't understand the recommendations they're giving, and so they don't trust them and don't want to adopt them. Secondly, they're often very low profit opportunities. They're fractional, and that means that you need to do a huge number of them in order to see a significant benefit from them. And secondly, the market often corrects automatically. This answers what OG tells, right? They say, arbitrage, oh, big problems, what are we going to happen with market efficiency? Yes, what happens is the price adjusts, and then what the HFT is taking advantage of disappears. And this means that they both provide a great public service in pointing out places where the market isn't done properly, in pointing out where there is arbitrage, and also help us correct that while making a very small profit off it. We think this is not just a good thing, it also means that they quickly lose their value from that and constantly have to innovate. And so if you take the tax from them, they become very not worthwhile very, very quickly, and so are unlikely to be adopted. Notice, the delta of money here is really important. People have to prioritize because most investment banks don't have endless amount of money, despite what debate would lead you to believe, and they prioritize the most profitable opportunities with the least amount of backlash and the things they have to push. If what we do is make this significantly more expensive and significantly less profitable, it will be way, way, way less used and way, way, way less developed, and the algorithms will be way worse, and we'll have way worse market efficiency. Why is that bad? So, notice, this is also true of a lot of things I'm going to be discussing are true of long-term trading, but also all the analysis I gave is doubly true of long-term trading. Because if what they're doing, if the analysis is, it's dealt with to long-term, long frequent trading, then like that really replaces traders, and they're really against that. So I don't think that's a comparative that open government even really get to say. They say it, but they don't analyze it, and my analysis explains why it's not true. Yeah. So HFTs versus traders / LFTs, I guess. 1, I think we see far less investment in small companies. Why is this? 2 reasons. 1, when you're doing much larger, less fractional trades, you need to see a much larger profit from each individual trade. This means that you're going to inherently invest more in larger companies. Why? There are 2 reasons for this. 1, they have a much higher price per share, and that means that you don't need to put as many eggs in one basket when you're buying those shares, but also those shares themselves are worth more when you purchase them. Secondly, the second part of this is that you need to increase your certainty, right? When you're making a long-term play, something that's going to happen 6 months, a year, 2 years down the line, you need to be sure that that company isn't going to disappear, that you're not going to lose all your money, that there isn't going to be some kind of massive backlash that means everything is gone. That is much more likely to happen if you invest in the largest of companies, the ones that are almost proof against the biggest market, forces. Things like, I don't know, Microsoft, Apple, those kinds of things. And that means you overinvest in those kinds of companies because you can be more certain you're not going to lose money and more certain you're going to actually earn money. What that means is that you're not bothering to invest in small companies. Why would you do it on our side of the house? You're far more agile, right? You make an investment that can take advantage of momentary changes or very short-term changes in the status quo. So for example, a company announces it wants to take out a loan in order to build be able to purchase a mine that will have a huge amount of value. You can do that trade immediately, allow it to get that loan, and then the company will go up in value, and immediately you can sell and make that money. But if you have to put in the money and then wait until that company does that, and that company is competing in a large market, then there is a high chance that it will just lose out. Or even, you might be taking advantage of an opportunity that is relevant now, but not 3 months down the line. So you're also just going to be missing many opportunities that might come into being, but then disappear if you can't make the trade immediately. So we think that you have a lot less chances to invest in these small companies. What this then means is that these large companies get larger and larger, creating far more market concentration. We hear from opening government, oh no, markets may fail and collapse. Like, okay, but collapses are far better when you have small market corrections that are constantly traded that never even reach the pace where you have a 2008. Or you can have a 2008 where where things build up and build up and build up, and companies are propped up over huge amounts of time, and then they collapse and bring down massive portions of the market with them. No thank you. Secondly, we also, fine, opening.
Not algorithmic comparative, no pension funds and other non-HFTs, not a bubble analysis, not a weight, nothing.
I'm sorry, pension funds have access to these things because they're a part of the financial system and that's who the people they invest in, so I don't understand why they don't have access to HFTs. That just sounds weird to me. Secondly, I'm taking out most of your analysis with the idea of this comparative of the thing you talked about collapse, so I just don't think you're going to be winning this debate. I'm sorry. Secondly, I also think that when you have far more concentration of wealth in these large companies, they need to innovate a lot less, and also the marginal benefit from this investment is smaller. What do I mean to say? I mean that you don't make the investments in the high outcome things. So for example, you invest more in Apple, but that's coming at the expense of something that will invent a better way to build a road, which is a much smaller company, a much less certain company. You don't invest as much in the next drug company. You don't invest as much in these other options which have far better outcomes. Secondly, the act itself of concentrating the market means that these companies can demand higher prices, which makes their goods more expensive for everyone. If the market was more even because of HFTs, then people would be paying less for the products that they were actually buying. Finally, I also think that this correction of market inefficiencies that I've talked about is a public good itself by exposing malfeasance. Notice, we don't tax public goods, just like we don't tax charities, and thus we think that it is a legitimate thing not to tax also a utilitarian thing. Please propose.
High-frequency trading is like this motion. It's inaccessible to most, it's enjoyed by even fewer, but currently we can't avoid it. And therefore, since this kind of thing is here to stay, we may as well make the most of it. And the most that we can gain is tax revenue on a system that is here to stay anyway. There's also a joke in here about low interest rates, but it's less strategic for my friend. So, let's talk about what high-frequency trading is. I understood something about selling high, but if I learned anything from my time with Ayal, don't make any financial decisions high. But two clashes in this debate. The first on market volatility, and the second on whether or not, given a lack of delta, there are benefits we can earn from this to everyone who is not the 1% trading through this method. Let's start with a little bit of external rebuttal, first to what we got from closing opposition. So first of all, they tell us HFTs point out market inefficiencies. Look, they can't have it both ways. If there are significant gaps, that is to say the market is extremely inefficient, then it is still worth it when you're being taxed, and therefore people develop the algorithm. Maybe not used today, but if it's going to be relevant, you still think it's developed. If on the other hand, the market inefficiencies are just not that big and they mostly correct themselves, then there's not much delta to their case to begin with. Now, a couple of external things about and then let's get into the clashes. So, I think the only way they try to mechanize how this actually helps beyond, well, maybe just not necessary because the market corrects itself, is in this claim that actually, in more efficient markets, the money trickles down. Note two things on this. Firstly, Abbas said the entire panel is to the left, which means you can't run trickle-down economics and win. But secondly, and perhaps more importantly, it is just not comparative to taxes. That is to say, when we have revenue that we can actually invest directly in the populace, you can't win simply on saying that the markets do well while conceding that it is essentially the 1% who are trading through this method. Yeah, clashes. Okay, not yet, but in a second. So, market volatility. OG tries to win by running how there are cycles and stocks can spiral out of control when things go too fast here. Look, firstly, OO just tells them that often the incentive is to invest in a company with a good financial plan that has been lowered specifically by HFTs. Meaning, we are more likely to see things not entirely crash. We think we don't get clear analysis on when this is likely to happen and why actual good companies are likely to be knocked down to the point of burning. Given the efficiency that these HFTs have, we think they are likely to rebound, at least in most cases. Then, we should also just note OG's concession on day trading being a zero-sum game, and unfortunately, I think this actually makes this entire clash less important. What ends up happening is, yes, you have day traders, yes, you have high frequency or low frequency or different algorithms that are moving money from one rich person to another. Opening half can only win on this clash by proving an actual market collapse or catastrophe or something that impacts the broader populace besides just day-to-day volatility. We don't think either team in opening half was able to reach that burden. Therefore, we think that what ends up mattering is where this money can actually go that's beneficial. And that's where we come into this debate when we talk to you specifically about the broader impacts of this tax. Before I explain why, despite Ayal's humor or attempts at humor, it actually makes some sense in this debate.
Question, engagement?
Who did you take? Okay, whoever didn't give Ayal a PLI.
Okay. Closing houses are confusing between fractional buying of stock that can happen at once by low-frequency trading algorithm and thus responding to a lot of either irrational actors quickly or preventing slippery slope analysis of OG, which we gave is the only relevant thing by opposition teams in this debate.
We agree. That was my rebuttal to them also. Now, let's talk about why taxation is actually the most important thing here. Look, Yishai says we don't explain why uniquely this tax. Other than all of Ayal's answers, look, the manual says it's only new information in a whip speech if the other side couldn't expect it. Given that they literally point out that this is the link we need to analyze, I think they can expect it, and therefore Look, also there's an exception there if your partner is high. So, let's be clear on this. We have a unique mechanism here to tax the rich, and specifically the rich, but to do it in a way that doesn't risk all of the major problems. Yes, we're on the eat the rich side, but we recognize that practically it is difficult. If jobs are going to be sent overseas, if manufacturing is no longer going to be happening in our country, if they can run to tax havens, it is deeply ineffective. Where is it effective? In the area where this debate essentially concedes that most rich people will still trade this way because this is still the best way for them to earn money. That is to say, this is a zero-risk way to tax the people who deserve the money the least and give it to the people who need it most. I don't know what's worse, that Ayal made me run cases of high people or that he turned me into a leftist, but both are happening and they can still work in this debate. Now, let's be very clear. The only answer we got to this is, oh, they might invest in China, from a team that spent like 9 of their 14 minutes talking about the fears of market volatility. We just think that there is not another stable enough market to invest, especially on a massive scale, certainly not in countries where things can be nationalized because Chinese owners have to own at least 50% of the corporation, where you can't actually know what's going to happen there. We still think it is obvious that major stock markets are still the easiest play. That is to say, look, it doesn't really bother us if they invest elsewhere in actual corporations, but we think the likely scenario, based on everything we got in this debate, is that while day traders may find something else to do, cool. But ultimately, the people who actually have the money recognize that this is still the best way to invest. Therefore, all of these questions on what do they end up doing, what happens when there's no high-frequency trading, we think become less important and washed out of this debate. What ultimately wins the debate is what we can actually do with this money. What that means is we have an easy source of actually taxing the rich. We have an easy way of making sure the income comes to the state without losing the investment of those rich people. And ultimately, we can put it into every single area. I know Ayal made this sound funny, but ultimately, yes, tax revenue is a great thing for the state. It is obviously the most direct impact on an economy, especially in cases where we've seen market crashes essentially, except the stock market is doing well. People are just poor. 2019 through 2021, that was most of the financial situation. The world is losing money in COVID, the stock market is gaining. We need to bridge that gap somehow. This is the easiest and most efficient way to take money of those traders and give it to the people who actually need it, who have been failed over and over again by the market. Proud to stand in closing government. Woo!
one. Look, we need to actively encourage, or at the very least not set up barriers to HFT in order to help adoption and create all of the enormous public goods benefits that we will have from that adoption. I will show how we win on the best market behavior and the most public good. But first, even if HFTs do kill babies, Ayal killed my soul during that speech. So let's kill CG's cage. Mostly this is revenge and not strategy. I'm sorry, Menachem, but I didn't give him weed. Now, first off, let's point out that realistically, when you're taxing this isn't a large amount of money in the grand scheme. Their impacts are barely realized. Second, you're stopping the growth, meaning you're making even less money off this thing. You're stopping it from ever being adopted. You're just not going to tax any significant money to begin with. But lastly, and crucially, this is not in practice taxation of the rich, because the result is harm to lower income individuals and a worse chance against the wealthy centralizing their wealth and preventing this. We are the ones who fix the problem that CG badly complain about. So we are the ones who actually achieve all of these benefits. Next, a quick response to this idea of if there were significant gaps and efficiencies, it would be adopted anyway. I think that these are small gaps that add up, and therefore these are still things to be gained and will create benefit and will create solutions, but not necessarily ones that fix themselves. But also, Yishai gave 5-ish reasons why, despite being good, this is being pushed out and buy-in is too slow, and tax will significantly slow this buy-in down. Not to mention, the mech given by OG that I don't think CG do get to suddenly throw out the window was, we will tax to slow down and stop people from adopting the thing. So I think the result of this motion is we slow down and stop people from adopting the thing. Great, so let's get into clash. Well, I mean a clash, which is market performance, because basically that is the important thing within this debate. So what do OG try and claim? They try and claim two things. The first thing they try to claim is volatility, and I think Yishai explains very effectively why this is not the reality, and demonstrates that at the end, inherently, if you are selling when it goes up a bit, but then buying when it goes down a bit, and all of these algorithms are trading with each other frequently and a lot on small margins, what this means is actually market is very stable, these trades are occurring frequently, and volatility is not increased. Their explanations of how volatility works are genuinely how people trade when they get really, really scared and everyone starts selling and don't think about the consequences, about the fact that there could be a little bump in the future, so actually better to buy right now and benefit of that. They defeat their own case, which is nice. The second thing that they talk about is, oh no, the average Joe can't compete against these things. Look, the reality is that because HFTs are in the end cheaper than humans, and because large companies are the ones who have the capital in order to create initial investment and set up HFTs, they are going to be the first adopters and the ones who actually create. This is where average Joe is invested. Most people just have their pensions in the largest companies because they're the ones that your employer had a deal with and was putting your pension into to begin with. That is where your money is, and you want them to be the one winning. You know who's trading personally and actually investing money, or are the traders? The wealthy people, the one with time and access to the information and the history of trading, and mostly way too much time on their hands and a weird interest in this topic, and who know that they're basically gambling away their money. We're taking the money from them and getting average Joe to compete better and get more of the money. Isn't that wonderful? Note, this means we flip the average Joe case because he is the one benefiting. Sure, opening.
Small companies using a raise in their stock value takes time for them to secure capital, etc. HFTs can help them without keeping the stock, which is equivalent to lower frequency trading. We already pointed out why pension funds don't actually do HFTs. This is very good.
It is not equivalent to lower frequency trading, and here's an important thing. What do HFTs do? They trade on small margins. Lower frequency trading, to the same extent as people, want to trade on larger margins because they're creating fewer trades, so in order to profit, each trade has to be more profitable. What this means is smaller companies that are initially of less value never have that potential of being a high margin trade, because you can't have a high margin from something of no low value, and therefore they are just invested in less. They are bought less, and there is less likelihood that money goes into them and that they have the opportunity to grow and have the opportunity to compete against larger companies. Also note, and I think this is important, another very frequent comparative is indices, which is what these companies use when they are trying to replace the individuals with something that is very simple and cheap and an algorithm and just a calculation. And these definitely prioritize the bigger companies that are at the top of the market and centralize all of the wealth there, as opposed to things like HFTs that are spreading the wealth more. Next, on
on OO and this idea that the market should self-police. First off, I think that we actually fulfill why the comparative to HFTs is so harmful to the market, and how these investors prevent growth, and how by bringing HFTs in more, we create more growth and we correct redistribution of wealth, which means we just achieve to begin with far larger impacts because we actually demonstrate the harms that are occurring that we are going to correct, and more harms. But also, we're not reliant on the market solving its own problems and self-policing, and obviously this does not always work out. I think there are a lot of examples in recent history where the market, unchecked by government, didn't necessarily behave in the best particular manner. We're not dependent on the market being able to slow HFTs down enough. We don't want to slow them down to begin with. We're not dependent on the market pushing them out, but also note we're the ones who analyze why there are barriers to HFTs and why we don't want to add more to them, and why what the government is doing is actually a harm by adding barriers to the situation, regardless of whether the market is right or wrong. We show the market is wrong and the government's adding more to that wrongness. Now, what do I have this to say? Look, at the end of the day, I think that we show significant benefits to all of society, which means that taxing this is just a harm to everybody. We show a correction of significant market failures. We show better redistribution of wealth and more growth and more innovation by individuals and by companies. And I think that the best underlying for all of this is fuck traders, fuck Wall Street douches, and especially every first date who ever tried to mansplain GameStop to me. I don't care about them being able to compete in the market. I don't want them to succeed. They are gamblers who are playing a game and trying to make money. I care about the people who put their trust and their pensions into companies in the market and trusted their futures to this, and they want HFTs being adopted by large companies so that their futures are more secure and the market benefits them more. Please oppose.